Apart from the obvious differences in building value, smaller apartment buildings differ from larger buildings in a number of ways that are critically important for our investment decisions. We've examined some of those differences in recent reports that you can find right here on the Alex Chatter blog. And there are three that I want to highlight briefly in this post: location, unit size, and amenities. Let's start with location. Taller, high, and mid-rise apartment buildings are concentrated in the urban core. To varying degrees, we can see that in the skylines of major cities across the United States. Washington, D.C. is a notable exception, but that reflects the district's height restriction. So while a majority of units in large properties are located in the urban core, units in smaller properties are actually distributed much more evenly across primary cities and their suburbs. One of the implications for small property investors, then, is that you have a broader set of location choices when building your portfolio. Think about it this way. For all intents and purposes, being a high-rise investor means you're an urban investor. That constraint doesn't apply for the investor looking at smaller properties. While they probably carry higher price tags downtown, there are smaller properties across the primary city and the suburb. The next difference I want to highlight is the size of the apartments themselves. In comparing the characteristics of apartments in smaller and larger buildings, our research finds meaningful differences in the sizes of the units. In large properties, the apartments tend to be smaller, and in smaller buildings with fewer units, the units tend to be larger. In part, this difference reflects the interaction between property size and location. Those smaller buildings are better represented in the suburbs, where the land supply constraint is less important. But there's another important dimension to this story. Households that choose to rent in the suburbs instead of the city will do so for a reason. It could be proximity to work. It could also be proximity to a high-quality public school. On balance, there are actually good reasons to think the household with children might prefer the suburbs, and they're probably not looking for a studio or one bedroom. Lastly, amenities. Those high-rise buildings in the urban core have more of them. That's no surprise, and I'll give you an example of why. Millennials are a big source of urban demand. The anecdotal evidence points overwhelmingly to millennials placing a high value on amenities, even willing to trade off to a smaller apartment if the building has a greater terrace or its own dog park. The other reason is scale. If you have 200 units, you can incorporate amenities that you just can't when you have only 20 or 30 apartments in your building. So where does that leave us? Apartments in smaller buildings are just as likely to be in the suburbs as the primary city. On average, they're also bigger. The target renter for the large apartment in the small building probably isn't a millennial or empty nester in search of rich amenities. Instead, it could be a family that needs more space to itself. You can read more about smaller buildings, small cap assets, and the small balance loans that back them in the research postings right here on the Alex Chatter blog. Please reach out to the Alex team. We'll make sure to address your question in one of our next research posts.